Hello and welcome to tonight's show. Let's get started.
If you should awaken, I will be there when you wake from your lovely
Hello and welcome back. As you know, I am CURT Williams, the spiritualist and hermeticist, author, and today we will be discussing chapter 19 of my book, Ungodly Gods. This chapter is about the Igig. Let me explain who the Igig was. When the Elohims came here from the planet Nibiru, they brought with them a subservient race of beings. These beings were called the Igig. They were the ones that did all the dirty work, all the mining and the digging and the things that these pretty much large, lazy Elohims of the book of Genesis did not feel like doing. And they were, now I'm going to get a little flack on the description, because one of the very few descriptions we have of the Igig is the pyramid text. Now they're very small, and if you see that pyramid text, there's no telling what they really look like. So I took a little liberty here. I don't want to be criticized for having an inaccurate description of the Igig, because whoever criticizes me didn't know what they look like either. So by physical descriptions, we have a sort of an idea of what they look like, and we know exactly what they were able to do and what they were capable of doing. They primarily, not only did they work the mines, but they worked the way stations that were away from Earth, because they would send the gold, basically in metal, to a way station on the planet Mars, where they would smelt and basically break the material down to what they called monatomic gold, so they can burst this powder into the atmosphere. The powder is much lighter than the metal, so they were able to transport more powder than they would have been able to transport metal. So this is indeed chapter 19, introducing the Igig.
Chapter 19, the Igig. Thousands of years before the Anunnaki came to Earth, the science community began experimentation with genetics and deoxyribonucleic acid, DNA. 50,000 years later, they developed the technology to replicate and code biology. By regenerating cells and blood modification, they found it possible to live longer and travel long distances in space. Though cloning was considered controversial, they could not resist the temptation to alter the genetics of lower life forms, such as primates. After many years of state-sponsored experimentation, they were able to take DNA from rhesus monkeys and other hybrid species of primates to create, modify and refine intelligent beings. With strands of their own DNA, they were able to create a variety of subspecies of themselves. Said species would be able to perform mid-level duties, such as mining minerals, farming, ranch, and maintenance work, etc. They were called the Igig. The Igig weighed about 60 pounds and stood no more than 1.5 meters in height. The Igig were mostly humanoid in appearance, except for the extreme body hair and with opposing digits on their feet. They were also able to understand and speak simple languages but found it difficult to calculate math beyond the number 10. The Igig were great climbers, diggers and jumpers, while having no inherent tendencies or desire to negotiate water. However, they seemed to be very rhythmic, with an uncanny ability to communicate both verbally and non-verbally by gesturing. They also had a natural ability to communicate with clicking sounds, tapping, and beating on different objects. Their mating practices were insatiable and incestophilic, often mating with members that were most familiar to them. They began mating as early as was physically possible. They lived in communities of about 100 and preferred caves rather than constructed housing. The Igig's food source were simple, consisting of fruits, nuts, berries, and an occasional outbreak of cannibalism, when extremely agitated or angered. The Igig were natural-born miners, and were very good at promptness, working long hours with little breaks under horrific conditions. There came a time when the mining operations on Atlantis became too difficult and cumbersome for the Anunnaki. For the past 2 years, they were only able to mine a small percentage of the much-needed ore. They needed the Igig. The miners sent word explaining, the work was too hard, the work was too long, and the mines were too small. They need the Igig. It was decided by council that the number of workers needed was much too great, and that frozen samples of Igig DNA would be available for transport in the next few months. With the news from the home world, the Anunnaki immediately stopped all operations on Earth Station Number 1.
Welcome back, everyone. Well, we've had a little glitch in the matrix. Today we tried to tape 2 shows. So obviously, with each show there is a wardrobe change. Last show, I introduced chapter number 20 when I should have been introducing chapter number 19. Or something like that. Anyway, so what I had on was consistent with the show before. So it's going to look a little glitchy, but hey, it's just clothes, it's just fashion. So anyway, we're here and we're going to correct this. And today we are going to talk about what I should have talked about before. The chapter entitled The Line of Lucy. The line of Lucy is very important because she's a very particular Igig. She is an Igig that was very special because when the Anunnaki came here, they didn't bring a bunch of Igig with them. They brought the base material to create a whole new, to put it kind of bluntly, a whole new batch of Igig. And in so doing, there was a bit of ambiguity on the part of the creator of the universe and Mother Nature. The creator of the universe and Mother Nature don't necessarily like it when beings start creating beings. That's their job. They do it naturally. They know exactly what they're doing and exactly how to go about it. When mankind, I don't care if it's an Elohim, whatever, when they start messing around with things that God has created naturally, they are going to be, well, the first problem with all of that is the being's natural tendency to want to pretend that they are the creator himself. Since they believe that, hey, we created you, then we get to be, you should refer to us in that reverent kind of design. And that's not what life is supposed to be. Because the Igig were created when they got here, in this story, Mother Nature and God decided to uplift the spirituality of a particular group of Igig. Basically, raising the level of the molecule dimethyltryptamine, which is the spirit molecule. In so doing, it will give these, particularly the Igig, more advanced feeling about themselves. And so basically, it describes how Mother Nature and God basically leveled out the amount of DMT in a particular line of Igig, so that they would be as smart and as evolved as their masters. This is the line of Lucy. This was what Lucy was. And Lucy, in so doing, Lucy became the primer, the predecessor of the modern day man. And this is her story, The Line of Lucy.
Chapter 20, The Line of Lucy.
Much material, both organic and primal, arrived from the planet Nibiru to aid in the recreation of the species Igig. Laboratories were established to accommodate hundreds, if not thousands, of individual units capable of hosting embryos waiting to be fertilized in glass tubes. Once the process is complete, the fertilized eggs would enter a host womb, a chosen primate to be completed. This process will take about 6 months. Eventually, a birth will occur, giving rise to a new genetic line of Igig. The newborns will spend the next 3 years in nurseries, then pass through conditions that seem more like kennels than classrooms. For the next 3 years, this will begin the process for preparing them for the life and the reason for their creation. The first group of Igig to be sent to the mines had in their presence a member that would become one of great importance to the future of mankind on Earth. Her lineage would survive not only the Igig wars against the Anunnaki, but the Great Flood and the creation of Earth's first humans as well. The recreation of a species on another planet had never been done in the history of the universe. It would come to generate much concern to Mother Nature. She witnessed the oppression of the Igig on Nibiru. She was hoping that it would not be continued until further spiritual evolution was made on the part of the Nephilim. Mother Nature then asked God, now what will become of the Igig? God knew that to give her the answer she requested would forever change the dynamic of the universe itself. The mother would not be able to resist the temptation or her superior intervention whenever she deemed it necessary. God and the mother could use their powers to help sway the spiritual growth of beings if called upon, but not to change the direction of the natural flow of evolution directly. Such an action would warp the development of said species. Suddenly, God realized that there may be a clause of ambiguity in the universal interpretation of said law. Because the Igig were created artificially, he may be able to step in and aid in this developmental process. God decided to increase the dosage of DMT, dimethyltryptamine, at the molecular level. The molecule was increased in one of the family lines of Igig, causing that line to advance more rapidly in their evolution than others related to their creed. This DMT would enter the incubation of the second born in the second group. She or he would become the spiritual leader of the Igig. The molecule would enter the soul of that person, and from that moment, that person would be like no other of her kind. The amount of DMT that was added was the extraordinary amount equivalent to that of her Anunnaki masters. She shall be special, and her name shall be Lucy. By the time Lucy was 1 year old, she began to speak words on the same level as her Anunnaki peers. She was also wise enough to keep her abilities a secret. Lucy's evolution began by her questioning everything, from food choices to her after-work activities. She also pondered the meaning of life as no Igig had ever done before. Although Lucy had only herself to converse with, Mother Nature and God would always be there for her. They understood fully the importance of her existence, for the line of Lucy would ultimately become the primer for the formulation of Earth's future mankind. One night, while Lucy was sleeping, God interjected into her mind the word reason. The word became a part of her philosophical and theoretical lexicon. As soon as she understood what the word meant, she began applying the word to advance her understanding of all things that concerned her. With such awareness, all she could think about was the word why. Why do we live? Why do we die? Why am I the only one of my kind that speaks? Why do I always feel like crying? Why do I this? And why do I that? One why after another, as her mind seemed to burst with questions from within. It became difficult to hold back her emotions. However, God was always there in spirit to comfort her. She even seemed to understand the concept of him. In a near mountain range, in close proximity to Lucy, a natural geothermal pool was near boil, a volcano, and it needed a nudge from Mother Nature to blow a flow of lava or magma, causing the immediate evacuation and extreme panic to everyone and everything within miles of the event. In minutes, the floor erupted. Hot material bursting into the heavens, spewing rock and lava for days. Fractures in the Earth's crust, a breach in the world's outer integument. In a panic, screams came from everywhere. Hundreds of Igig and Anunnaki were running frantically, trying to escape the lava flow caused by the explosion of the great volcano. As Lucy cried out like never before, one Igig followed her, then another, and yet another, until all Igig were following Lucy, running to escape the cataclysmic event. Since Lucy did not know what to do, she need only follow the path that Mother Nature had already laid out for her. They all came together as they climbed a safe hill, where they huddled together, all shaking, while gazing at Lucy for guidance. There were no sign of an Anunnaki presence. All the Igig stood staring at the one whose screams led them to safety. Screams with a different tone and morphology, one that had never been heard before, and from that moment on, she would become their leader. Lucy will soon die off, having offspring, all born with the ability to speak, yet hiding it. It was also the beginning of a great change in evolution, a change into a new and more intellectually advanced and resilient species. She would be labeled Australopithecus, which were thought to be the early relatives to the modern-day man. Thousands of years at a time would pass, as the Anunnaki would leave the planet for thousands of years at a time, coming back every now and again, their need for gold still great. Every time they came back, they would have to round up and recapture their Igig slaves in order to effectively run the gold mines. Anticipating the return of the red-headed giants from Nibiru, new weapons such as catapults and trebuchets were developed to defend from their oppressors. They would begin to have meetings to discuss their treatment, trying to find better and more efficient ways to assist the Anunnaki. This would be a species' first attempt at a movement of civil rights on the planet Earth. They began with conferences in the deepest jungles or on the high peaks, anywhere they could find to do so, and it was always a descendant of Lucy that would be the spokespersona. Much time would go by with very little change. It seemed that war may be inevitable.
Welcome back. Now you get an idea, you have an idea of who the Igig were. They were sort of a primate kind of group, and it was, I'm sure it was a mixture of that particular primate that added to the constitution of what later became the modern day man. And so as you see, they weren't treated very well. They would not have called it quite like slavery, because slavery is something more like you capture somebody and keep them in sort of a bondage. Well, this was more of a cheap labor kind of situation. They weren't kept in bondage, but they were kept in a situation where they didn't have much of a life outside of the average. Well, actually, you can maybe you can equate them to sort of a migrant worker, where you're working the orange and fruit vineyards and things, where actually everything you do is within that community. Sort of similar to that. At least that's the idea that I was led to understand. One of these days I'm going to talk about, well, I'll talk about a little bit of it right now. Back in the 80s, the United States government contracted people who felt that they had a sort of a ability to go into a meditation, concentrate on certain things, and come up with ideas of how those things looked like, felt like, were like. These were called scientific remote viewers. They used them in war. The government spent millions and millions of dollars on this program. What they would do is take 10 people, for instance, and ask these people to concentrate on a certain thing, a certain idea in a certain area. Then they would analyze the things that these people came up with. They would then determine how many of the ideas in the particular group constituted a consistency, so to speak. The more the consistency in the group, the more accurate they believed their ideas were. They were trying to find military locations and hideouts, and this goes all the way back to basically Desert Storm and things like that, and they believed they were very successful at this. I, on the other hand, do not necessarily believe in the whole principle of scientific remote viewing. Simply because, as a spiritualist, I understand that my spirit is my primary aspect, like I've told you before, and I believe that my spirit can go find out anything it wants to find out. If I want my spirit to go find out what the enemy is doing somewhere, I'll just say, can you go find out what they're doing? The only catch is, your spirit is capable of doing those kinds of things if it wants to. Now, it might not want to, because your spirit will determine what is best for you. Your spirit may decide that, okay, down the road, this will get you killed. And your spirit might just not allow you to know anything. Your spirit is not going to come back and give you information that is not going to benefit you spiritually. But scientific remote viewing, I've analyzed this. The information that they were coming back with is the same information. It could have been gotten easier if they just said, can you go and find out, where did they hide the bombs? And one day I'll get into the adventure that it took for me to come to this place. I am not doing this because it's something I just picked out of the sky and chose to do. I was chosen to do this by a certain principle. And the reason I was chosen was probably because I had an aptitude towards this information. Well, that's our show for today. Thank you for joining. I love everyone. Please continue watching. Please continue to support this channel. I would at least like to get through the entire book. And there's 70 chapters. No need to buy or purchase the audiobook, because what you're seeing in these chapter episodes with videos is in fact the audiobook. So once again, thank you for coming, and please come back and subscribe.